The VVN Music interviews are brought to you by VVN Music. Get the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues at vvnmusic.com. And by audible.com. Now you can get a free book download from their library of over 180,000 titles by going to audibletrial.com/VVN. Hi, and welcome to episode 49 of the VVN Music Interviews. I'm Roger Wink, and I'm honored to have Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member Glenn Hughes as my guest. Hughes started professionally as a member of the British band Trapeze, and in 1973 was recruited to become the lead singer and bassist for Deep Purple. He was with the band for 3 years and appeared on the albums Burn, Stormbringer, and Come Taste the Band, along with the live album Made in Europe. Since Deep Purple, Hughes has had a very busy and eclectic career with over a dozen solo studio albums, along with time with such groups as Phenomena, Black Sabbath for the album Seventh Star, Voodoo Hill, California Breed, and his current band Black Country Communion. That group, made up of Hughes, Joe Bonamassa, Derek Sherinian, and Jason Bonham, have just released their 4th studio album. Well, thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate it, and it's an honor to talk to you.
Oh, the pleasure's mine, my friend.
You know, the word supergroup gets bandied around a lot in all sorts of different situations, and there's actually only a few groups that probably deserve that title, and to me, one of those is Black Country Communion. How did you manage to get 4 such high-powered musicians together?
I started working alone with Joe in 2009, and it was we got together like half a dozen times at his studio in North Hollywood. I met him at the NAMM show in January of 2009, and we were he's a young man and he knew about my work from the 70s, and I'd heard about him. A lot of my friends were talking about Joe, and so. We thought, hey, we'll just get together and see what happens, So, and we did, and we started to sort of, slowly but surely come up with some ideas that might fit. We didn't know where we were going, whether we were going to be like a, rock band. Are we going to go to Nashville? Are we going to go to Memphis? Are we going to go to Detroit? We didn't really know. We were eventually going to become Black Country Communion.
You recorded 3 albums together, and they were all really well received, and along with the live album. And then Joe decided he wanted to go his own way. What made him decide to come back into the group?
Well, what happened? It's quite. I think the facts are this: when we were notified, that there was not going to be a tour after Afterglow, after the album came out. There's going to be one show. We basically took it off the back. We just took it off the boil. It's not a case of who left or who didn't stay. It was pretty obvious that if we're not going to tour, it was impossible to continue. I sort of walked away in September of 2012. And I didn't go public with it. I didn't, discuss it. I just walked away because I was worried that we weren't able to tour and weren't able to do our work for fans. So I thought it was best to just go my own way, And then the next year the band sort of broke up.
The new album continues the classic rock mixed with a little bit of blues and a little bit of other genres. The sound that you had, did you have any thoughts of changing things up going into the 4th album?
Yeah, when we got together to do this, Joe and I were alone writing this album when we decided we would do this. I was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Joe called me in New York last April, 2016, we got together in LA and discussed what we should do, how we should do it, what the songs should sound like, what direction we were going to go in. It was very obvious where we should go. My concern was I just wanted it to be a very, very memorable album to compete with the other ones. because the first three albums are pretty stellar, you know. And I wanted the new one to be, if you don't mind me saying so, I wanted it to be epic.
The opener of the album, Collide, seems to continue your original idea of, along with classic rock and blues and so forth, to also kind of keep the Led Zeppelin sound in there. It has a very classic feel of an older Led Zeppelin track. Was that your intention with it?
You know, to be honest with you, when writing these songs, there's never a moment where Joe and I are going out of the box to sound like Zeppelin. I'll just say this, and this is a real honest statement, as honest as I can get. When Joe and I brought these songs into the studio, played them to Jason and Derek, when you've got Jason Bonham playing drums with you, it sort of guides its way into that territory when you're writing songs in the ilk of what these songs are. Let's just take, for instance, like, we didn't want to make a record like a modern rock record. We wanted to make a record that sounded like in the 70s. And people say, why do you do that for? Well, it's kind of what this band is, you know. It's for the fans that never got to see Zeppelin or Purple or the classic rock giants of the early 70s. And, you know, I am from that generation, as you know. I'm in my 60s now, and that's where I thought this band should be, you know. A lot of new bands wish they had the ability to play and write in that genre. So when writing these songs, you've heard the album, you know, there's definitely a tip of the hat to Zeppelin. We knew we were stepping into that territory. And it's like we're not trying to be that band. I don't sound like Robert, but there's a definitive tip of the hat to that movement.
And to your credit, I think that really is the only track on the album that I really had that feeling from. I mean, it really is fairly varied sound-wise, and as I said, that was the only one that reminded me of it.
Well, you know, let's talk about that for a second. That's the first song that I kind of came up with, and when we demoed it, Joe and I, when we played it to Jason in the studio, we knew that he was going to stop after the riffs stopped. You know, on that moment where it goes to E to F to G, we knew that that's where he would stop playing, and that's where the vocal would come. And it was like, you know, it's like funny, but it's the way the song was written. Knowing full well, if we come up with this riff and then it stops, that's surely where the drum's going to stop. And that's kind of Zeppelin-ish. And the riff is kind of Zeppelin-ish. What we didn't do, we didn't deliberately dig into the Zeppelin riffs. We just sort of went, okay, this is kind of working. This kind of set the pace. Again, it was the first song we wrote together. And we knew it was a tip of the hat.
The second song on the album, Over My Head, is probably my favorite, and it sounds like something that would be really great played live. But my understanding is that you kind of came up with the song out of nowhere while laying in bed one night. I
did. Gabby woke me up. It's like, I don't know, middle of the night. She said, honey, what's over my head? I said, what? She said, you've been singing Over My Head. And I went, whoa. Oh. Then I went, oh. Then I left my bedroom and went upstairs to my studio, and I kind of mumbled into the machine, you know, a couple of things. And when I got up the next day, there was this melody, Over My Head. It kind of sort of came out, you know, and I've never wrote a song in a dream state before, but there's always a first, I guess, you know. And, you know, it's very similar to One Last Soul from the first album when I came up with that idea, you know. I just took it into that territory.
One of the interesting tracks on the album is the last song, For My Resting Place, because all of a sudden a fiddle comes in and you start to get a little bit of an Irish feel to it, and it really stands out as something very different amongst all the other tracks.
Well, let me tell you, when we put that down, when Joe and I came up with that song, primarily Joe came up with it and I finished it with him. When we were, putting it down in my studio, we had no idea there was going to be a fiddle there. It's like, we didn't know where we were going with we knew there was going to be an acoustic guitar and mandolin on the song, of course. And then, obviously when the track was recorded, it was obviously, we sent the track over to Ireland where one of the guys in the Dubliners played fiddle on it, I thought, if there was going to be a violin on the album, it would probably be a violin on the track. But then again, it ended up being realistically a fiddle by an Irish man, And, look, it sounds different to anything else on the album, but it's a superlative song. It's definitely a timeless piece of music that will sound this good in 20 years' time. So this is the kind of thing you like. Then there's nothing better than this kind of song on this kind of an album.
It's always great to be going through an album and all of a sudden come to a little surprise in the middle like that. So it was great. And I didn't have the credits here, and I had no idea that it was one of the members of the Dubliners that was playing.
I know. Like nobody has the credits, and, obviously it's my job if you wanted to discuss it. So, like I said, that song, when Joe brought it in, and he came with his mandolin into the studio, he was so excited. And there was obviously two parts to the song, that crazy rock section, and it was like, we had to record it in 3 different stages in my room. And we knew that this song was going to be different to all the other songs. And in fact, some of Joe's songs, like Song of Yesterday on Hadrian's Wall from 1 and 2, sounds just a little bit different to the rest of it. But this one, Song from My Resting Place, is definitely something completely different. And I say different, but it's grand and glorious, but it's just different. And although it's different, it most definitely fits this album. It's kind of there's different energies on this album. There's different moods and different settings. And, as I said, Joe and I wanted to explore all territories on this album.
You mentioned Joe and his background. When you first started recording the first album, and with Joe having his background very heavily in blues, was it a time that he had to take to get more used to a rock format, or did he have some experience before?
No, the crazy thing about Joe, and I say this out of love, I really do. When I got together with Joe 8 years ago, I was quite impressed at Joe's knowledge of my friends Free, the band Free, Paul Kossoff and Paul Righteous and Simon Kirk, and then my dear friend Andy Fraser, bless his heart. Joe's very much influences, obviously Joe's 40, so Free broke up 42 years ago. But one of Joe's biggest influences, if you know anything about Joe at all, other than the Kings, as you know, that he loves Free and he loves Paul Kossoff. And, his tip of the hat to that band and that guitar player are very obvious to those people that know. So when I started to work with Joe, we started to dig in that territory a little bit, that halftime, less is more groove, tempo stuff. And his knowledge of early 70s rock music, especially British rock music, is quite incredible. So when we formed Black Country, we definitely had I think Joe was more influenced by Free than he was Zeppelin. And I think you can hear that on this album.
You wrote all the lyrics, and I guess Joe also co-wrote lyrics and wrote melody. How do you two go about doing the songwriting?
Okay. On the first 3 albums, let's take it album by album. On the first album, Joe came to my home, and we wrote 3 or 4 songs. And, I come up with a couple of ideas, and Joe finished them. Joe was very busy, as you know, all those years ago. And, I do write a lot of music daily, 365 a year. That's what I do most of my time is write. But on this particular album, I thought it would be really great to write all the music together in my room. You know, we were like, you know, facing each other on a couple of chairs, you know, and it really worked great. And on the lyrical content, I do most of 90% of the melodies are mine, and I write a lot of the lyrics because that's what I love to do. You know, Joe wanted me to be happy doing what I do, and I absolutely wanted him to be happy doing what he does. I just wanted him to write more music with me on this particular album. I knew this album was important for the brand and the band. I knew this album was it needed to be as good as the first three. In fact, it's probably better than the first three.
It's funny that at least chart-wise, and I assume sales followed, that the first three Black Country Communion albums did better in the UK and Europe than they did here in the States. And this phenomena I have seen so many times with R&B artists, blues artists, and other rock artists, that there seems to be this appreciation in the UK and Europe for all those styles that seems to escape the general public in the US.
I've got some opinions about that, but I'll keep it to myself. But I think the promotion in Europe is way more extensive than it is in America. It's difficult for me to go into detail. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that I get to, and you have to believe this, I get together with Joe and write these albums. I get together with the guys to make these albums. And we get together, and I've just done 9 weeks of interviews. I've done over 160 interviews alone, simply because everybody else is too damn busy, and I've been busy. But I just like to take time out to do these interviews because I got to get it done, you know. So yeah, the albums do really well in Europe. Yeah, and we play more in Europe than in America, and I'm not sure if it's a rock versus music thing or fan base or whatever it is. I'm not sure. I'm not saying anything other than we just make great records, you know. We just simply have to make great music. But let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's because I write mainly about veteran artists who have been recording for 20 years or more. It's frustrating when I see the British album charts almost every week have 3 or 4 of those veterans in the top 10. And in the U.S., you go down to like 30 or 40 before you see the first one. And it's very frustrating to me.
Well, look, you're very knowledgeable about what's going on Billboard. And, you know, Billboard has been the longest, the greatest chart magazine we have in the whole world, you know, and I really respect it. But as you know, if you look in the top 20 pop chart or album chart, unless it's a blues chart or a rock chart, you're going to see, you might only see one rock act like a Foo Fighters or a Chili Peppers, or, you know, if you know, somebody else from my era brings an album out, you know, Roger Waters or whatever. You won't see a glut of rock albums like you used to see in the 70s and 80s in the top 20. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And it's like, yes, I think rock music is taken more seriously, if you can say that, in Europe than it is in America. But you have an amazing, obviously, American heritage of rock music is huge here. It's a shame that we don't see so much coverage and so much love for the genre that we make. It's kind of been like that for a while, though.
It has. I mean, when Chuck Berry put out his last album, or when it was released shortly after his death, I mean, it was top 10 in Britain, and over here, I think it went to 38 or something like that. And it was really a good album.
It is damning, you know. It is, you know, when, you know, you see this. I mean, you know, realistically, I know we'll do really well in Europe, and I'm not sure. I mean, the album will be heard here, and the album will be played, and blah blah blah. I honestly don't think about record sales anymore, because it's just a different kind of topic. I just make music to make music, and try to get to as many people as possible. I write so many bloody pieces of music. It's insane. But when we make these albums, it's like we just go in the studio and just cook, and we just like let it go. It's a remarkable achievement to be a participant writing these songs.
You mentioned all of the things that you're doing. I understand that a little bit later this month you're about to go off to Australia and New Zealand for a short tour, performing the music of Deep Purple for, I guess, the first time over there.
Yeah, I mean, I was there, of course, with Purple 40 years ago, and it's like, I haven't done a tour like this, embracing my heritage with Deep Purple. I've never done this kind of a thing. The band, as you know, Deep Purple are finishing their touring forever in November, and I just figured, I haven't done this before. I just figured I'm starting to get asked by promoters around the world to bring this to the markets of the people that want to see it. And of course I'm going, it's probably that time for me to do it now. I'm in my 60s. I still have a passion to sing. I've never lost the edge of my voice. I'm very busy, very, very much, I guess, very spiritually in shape and physically and mentally in shape, if you may know that. So I just figured it was time for me to go out and embrace the songs that I created with the band in the early 70s.
Well, obviously you're very busy with the new album and with that particular tour, but one of your projects that I really enjoyed was California Breed. Is there any chance that may make a comeback at some point in the future?
No. It was a difficult thing to be a band with a guy that was 40 years my junior, and Jason. There was the three of us, and it was just a difficult album to record, because I put myself in a situation where I wasn't sure I wanted to be in a band like this. I was about to make another solo album. I got regressed into doing something I was unsure about, and halfway through it, I'm going, I think I made the wrong decision here. So when it was done, Jason didn't want to tour. So it was a difficult thing for me to continue, but I did do a tour because my name was already out there to do it. So there's no way we could ever reform that band. It just wasn't the right vehicle for me.
You already mentioned this, but last April, I think it was, Deep Purple, after a long, not terribly good wait and with fan lobbying, was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I assume that had to have been a tremendous honor after that time.
It was, and I don't know if you know, but about 4 or 5 guys that played in Deep Purple never got inducted, and of course David and I did. I just think the work we did on Burn, just that album alone, we did 3 albums together, David and I, with the band. I just think that the sales and the success that album had, with the fans and with the chart success, so I think Burn is like one of the top 3 all-time selling albums Purple ever made. So it was very, 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 very enjoyable to stand on the stage in front of our peers and, of course, our families, and a televised event, a national event. And it was a thing that I will never forget. It was a wonderful achievement.
You were also on Stormbringer, correct?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because I was going to say, I mean, Burn obviously was big commercially, but Stormbringer was also a great album. So
it was a different kind of Blackmore. Richie stopped. He only came in with a couple of songs on the album. I think he was thinking about doing something different, as you know, he did a year later. Hence that he left the writing to John, David, and myself. So obviously we came up with songs like Holy Man, You Can't Do It Right with the One You Love, and Hold On, and different kinds of music. And it was a departure for the band. I think it's a beautiful record, by the way. but it isn't anything other than it's not. Look, I've always, in fact, every album with Deep Purple was something was different in whether it was a new member, whether it was the songs were completely different. The band were growing and moving on a different path.
Well, listen, Glenn, I want to thank you for calling in, as I said before, and I wish you all the luck with the new Black Country Communion album. I think it's a really, really good album, and I hope it finds all the success.
I do too, and I think we're gonna do well. And thank you so much for the love and support.
The VVN Music Interviews can be heard via iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Libsyn, and the VVN Music website. For the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues, go to vvnmusic.com. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. The VVN Music Podcast is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2017.